All right, we are live. Thank you for your patience this evening. This is Robert Phoenix, and you are you, whoever you are in this incarnation. And I hope you're having a fine incarnation, as it were, today. And well, whoever you've been up to this point, and whoever you will be. It's been an interesting weekend for me. Been going through a lot of stuff, right? A lot of it's my mother stuff, and it's been it's been an interesting journey for sure. Um, some of the things that I've run across, well, a lot of the things I've run across have been pictures, and I just get choked up just thinking about it. To be honest with you, and it really, some of it is related to the passing of my mother, but it's more than that. It's all these people and these faces and these relatives who are no longer around, and these lives that were part of that cluster. It wasn't even members of my own family or extended family, but you know friends, neighbors, people that have been along for the journey and along for the ride, and most of them are gone, and it's really kind of an amazing thing to sit back and just look at, um just the personal historical references. And I know a lot of you have a similar experience in your own life as you begin to age out, and these people that were very, very close to you in parts of your family leave before you. And some of you might have really strong families, family reunions, gatherings, get-togethers, cross-generational stuff. I never had that, right? I never had any of that. I mean, it was like here we were, where were these people sort of all kind of growing together in this sort of odd petri dish, and then clusters of other people in other parts of the country who were related uh, by blood, but it was never anything like thick as thieves and tight, and wasn't really like that. And my lifestyle in general, as a being in this world, has been, I would say, less than static. Meaning, I've moved a lot. Like, I've moved probably somewhere between 40 and 45 times. And I'm in my mid 60s, so I've moved a lot. And I was never somebody who said, from an early age, I am going to start a family, and I'm going to do all of these family things that are going to connect into a larger family, and then we're going to project this thing out generations down the line. And I was never that person. Maybe there are people out there that are like that. I was never that person, and I always felt very much like an outsider, and kind of a nomad, a wanderer in a lot of ways. So it was like I was almost wandering through that experience as well. Although I was there, I was present. I really enjoyed and appreciated a lot of these people, including my grandparents and some of the other people that were associated with a lot of these pictures. But this all feels so incredibly transient. And I don't know if it's a byproduct of the time itself, because it feels very much like we are living in a very transient universe, and things are changing rapidly. Um, and a lot of the things that we took, I wouldn't say took for granted, but a lot of the things that perhaps we did take for granted, or we just assumed would always be there, there's no guarantee they're going to be there. And so when I look at those pictures and all of those lives, it's not just like my own life in staring my own mortality in the face, right? It's also something that exists to a different time that no longer exists. And I don't know if people did this in like the 1950s and they sat around, or the early 60s, and they sat around and they looked at daguerreotypes, right, from the teens and the 20s, and they all sat around and said, well, those were the good old days, when we opened up our cans and put them over the open flame and ate out of our cans. I mean, I don't know if they had those discussions back then. I don't. Obviously, I wasn't there. But this feels different, right? Because there are some of us who have an understanding of a different place and a different time. And I talked to, if you haven't seen Friday's show, I highly recommend it. I sat down with David Soretta for probably about an hour and a half, and we talked about his idea of this new solar system that sort of is existing on top of our current solar system. And his proof of work was really, really interesting. But one of the things that I brought up was this idea that we were living in this inverted reality. And because he was talking about antimatter, and I talked about anti-people, and kind of jokingly threw in the term Antifa. And when you look at those mugshots of people who protested for Antifa, they don't look like normal humans. They don't. There's I remember looking at these photos in 2020 when these people were getting busted. Like, where's the reference point for these people? I was not seeing it. Right. So for me, this whole idea that we sort of slipped into this inverted universe or this inverted reality, I think started to crop up somewhere. I don't know when it really started to pop in, maybe around 2015, maybe 2012. Right. So now we're living in this very different, sort of strange time. I'd call it a high strange time. And so when I look back in those photos and I look back on the connection to a different point in time, it feels even more distant and even more, in some ways, dislocated. Like, it's almost like, did it ever even exist? You know what I mean? Although I know that it exists because I feel like I'm the carrier of that experience. I know a lot of you are as well. So it's been an interesting weekend just dealing with those kinds of memories and also sort of playing around with the end of time, because it feels like this is really what it's about. And we have all of these sort of geocosmic or these solar disturbances that are going on. And the weather seems to be getting very uh, radical. Like in Houston, they had tornadoes in Houston. They don't normally have tornadoes in Houston. They have hurricanes, but not tornadoes. And they went blasting through Houston and wiped out a lot of power. I think some of Houston is still a lot of power. And apparently this week in the Midwest, they're predicting that there is going to be severe weather in the Midwest. Now, you could say, well, that's all HARP. It's all HARP related. And I don't really have a problem with that, because HARP has been influencing not just weather, but people. That's the other thing that people don't understand about HARP, is that it's not just, okay, well, we're going to spray a bunch of chemtrails in the sky and then we're going to blast it with these scalar waves. We're going to alter the ionosphere, and then we're going to, create rain, or we're going to create a drought, or whatever it is. Well, people are caught in the crosshairs of HARP as well. It's not just the weather conditions. So that's another interesting point of discussion that maybe we can have some other time. But but it feels very much like that we're cycling through the end of an age. And we know that Pluto's in Aquarius and that everything moving forward, especially when Uranus and Gemini kicks in, it's just going to get fucking hyper accelerated and weird and strange. Interesting. It could be interesting. Like I'm always a big fan of novelty, even if it's strange novelty. But it feels like we're at the end of this age. And yeah, it just has that vibe, right? It has that vibe. Like it feels like this is the last election. And we've played this out that after 2024, Pluto's in Aquarius, and I think governance starts to look a lot different, whatever it is, however it looks. We're going to cover this is a bit of an audible, but we're going to Iran has a chart which I have never really spent a lot of time with. And as most of you know, the president of Iran uh, went down in a helicopter today. Now, there are various reports that the president is either well or let me see what I got here. Audio. Yeah. Okay. Is either well or okay. I don't, nobody really knows, right? Nobody really knows. But if this is true and this helicopter did go down, then we're at the precipice of something perhaps even greater. Now, I've always been of the mind that Iran and Israel would not go to war because they're both client states. Now, this might be a bit of a game changer. We'll have to take a look at it. We'll take a look at Iran's chart. So I'm going to get into chat, say hello, and see who's here. But here's the map for tonight's show. I've been really interested in the Digitene and uh, Algol as kind of this offshoot of the Digitene, where the Sun and Uranus and Jupiter have all been around and clustered around Algol, which we'll go over tonight. And Algol, known as the Demon Star, the Medusa Star. So we're gonna get into that tonight. And whenever I kind of get into this territory, I always think of the French Revolution. And the French Revolution went on for 10 years. 10 years of just absolute madness and crisis and mayhem and chaos. And the French Revolution, of course, leads to Napoleon, who becomes, dictator. He becomes Caesar. Napoleon becomes Caesar. So out of the rubble and the ash of the chaos of the French Revolution, Napoleon is there waiting in the wings. And it's kind of like what happens during a period of collapse in a society, that there is the possibility for one person to emerge out of the chaos and begin to restore order, right? Take control and give people a quote unquote national or collective sense of identity. So Napoleon clearly plays that role as the French Revolution ends. Hitler plays that role after the Treaty of Versailles, and they have all the onerous sanctions that are laid upon the German people. And then you have the Weimar Republic. And again, what we have is decadence, chaos, disorder. And then out of that, there's one individual who arises and takes control and becomes this embodiment of the folk, right? Theoretically. So here we are in 2024. We have an election that I think is going to be the last election. And I have two scenarios for the election. One is the Mike Johnson scenario, where the election is contested, and both sides believe they win, and that the country goes into a state of martial law because there is an undue amount of violence and restlessness and just outright chaos, because there are people that are invested in one candidate versus the other candidate, and there's all this pent up emotion already. So they lock it down. The country has to keep running. Biden clearly is not the president at that time. It is indeterminate, right? So the person who would then be in charge would be Mike Johnson. So that is scenario, I would say, one. And scenario 1B is Donald Trump. I mean, you could flip those. You could put Trump on top of Johnson. I don't think Biden is going to win. And so I think it's either going to be Trump or Mike Johnson. And if it's Trump, then it feels like we're coming out of this period of chaos, disorder. The borders aren't being guarded. We have millions of people in the country, and there are whoever wins. Well, I'm not. If Biden here, we'll put Biden over to the side because Biden doesn't qualify as the type of person that we're talking about. But if it's Trump or if it's Mike Johnson by default, then the people are going to want that person to restore order at any cost. And that's kind of where the parallels are with the French Revolution coming out of the Treaty of Versailles and then the beginning of the Third Reich, right? So, and it also coincides astrologically with Saturn and Neptune in Aries, which we've talked about before. Before the night's over, we'll talk about again. So we're going to go back and we're going to look at some aspects of the French Revolution, which actually mirror some aspects of 2025. Now, they're not exact, but they're very close. And so we're going to have a look at both of those charts tonight. We're going to look at Robespierre's chart, and we're going to look at Napoleon's chart because they both share a very interesting aspect. They're in different signs, but I'm going to show this to you, and it feels to me like something to pay attention to in terms of, well, you can just use it on your own, right? Well, we can just say, okay, well, if this person has this aspect in your chart, you better pay close attention to this person. That's all I'm saying. But there could be a larger ramification in terms of public figures with this particular aspect, which I'm going to share with you. We're also going to look at Harrison Butker's chart tonight. Now, I don't have his birth time, but I mocked up his chart. I gave him a noon birth, like a high noon time. And I'm sure if we wanted to, we could probably go through and, kind of rectify it. But he has an incredibly strong chart, a very strong chart. So if you don't know who Harrison Butker is, he is the place kicker for the Kansas City Chiefs. And he came out last week and he gave a speech at a Benedictine college. And he was basically promoting traditional values. What's interesting about Butker is that he also put the Catholic Church on blast. He put them on blast. And it wasn't as if his own religious background. Let me see if I can just change this a little bit. Is that good? Hold on, right there. It wasn't as if his own religious background was immune or his own religious belief was immune from his own criticism and his own standards. He he put his own faith front and center and said, look, we need to do a better job. And the representatives of our faith have not been, well, how shall we say, the most faithful. So it's a really interesting speech, and it is absolutely causing a wildfire right now, and socially. And what's fascinating about Butker is that his jersey is now the most purchased jersey in the NFL. Think about that for a second. The most purchased jersey. It's not Pat Mahomes. Uh, who else is your typical NFL star? I don't know. Tyreek Hill. It's not Tyreek Hill. It's not even Aaron Rodgers. It's Harrison Butker, a kicker, who has the most popular selling jersey in the NFL. That's really something. I don't know. We're packing a lot in, but if we have time, we might be able to look at Diddy's chart as well, which I've never done, only because it's just so, it's so fucking tawdry. And I'd rather us talk about things that are uplifting sometimes, or at the very least have some historical perspective so that we learn a few things along the way. But we may take a look at Diddy's chart, time permitting. And that way we'll have an incredibly full show. We'll probably go for about 2.5 hours. So thanks for being here, and thanks for your patience. Let's get rolling. Let's see who's here in chat. By the way, if you'd like to subscribe, that'd be awesome. Could always use more subscribers. Hit the like button, which is important. Helps us with the algorithm. The bell, which will remind you that there's a show happening, and we have quite a few shows here. And what else? We got the locals group, which is getting fired up, and we're getting ready to have our first private member-only session. I'll be covering the astrology for the summer shortly on locals, so that'll be happening. And what else do we have? Oh yeah, if you want to get a reading, you can do that as well. Book a session with me. That link is there. We've got True Hemp Science, who's the sponsor of the show, and a great one at that. So if you're interested in CBD, go to Chris's site, truehempscience.com. Type in 15MINS, spend $100, and you will get a nice goodie bag to go along with your order. It's kind of like Christmas. And if you spend $150 or more, you can always get free shipping, and there's a 30-day money-back guarantee. And last but not least, if you'd like to buy me a cup of coffee, that's there in the show notes as well. All right, let's get down and get with it. Here's my man, DJ MC. What's going on, brother Mike? Penn Greedy is here. Double K, Catherine Kramer. What's shaking? Ryan, the introspective woodworker, not just anyone. He's the president. And I think he's the longest tenured president in the International Introspective Woodworkers Union of the world. I don't know if anybody's ever going to dislodge Ryan as president. There have been some coup attempts, but he just recently, he managed to fend them off. So he has basically maintained his position. He's a good Napoleon. All right, who else do we have here? Susie G, what's happening? The lovely and talented one, Dr. Joan S. She's in the house. Brandy Herrera from Ponca City, Oklahoma. Brandy Herrera gets around. Brandy, are you like part of a traveling circus or something? Every time you come in here, you're like in a different place, which I kind of like. Let's see. Tom Jordan. Tomas. What's going on, brother? Susie Gemini is here. Barbara Boots. That's with two O's and an E. She's here. Let's see who else. Scott Ann. Hey, Scott. Number nine. Fantastic. CC Jones in the house. Hey, we got a Rama Lama sighting. What's going on, Mishi? She's got a wrench. Use it well. Whimsical Farm Girl. Hello. Hope you're having a fine time up there in Oregon. Sandra Dag Shaw checking in from Mass. Oh, Brandy's headed to San Antonio. She's got to be part of a circus. Let's see. Laura E. Hey, Laura. Harry Bowie. Hey. Claire is here from Scotland. Sandy D. Hey, Sandy. Moon Sprout. Thor at the door. There's my man, Steve. What's going on, brother? Misbehaving 2. WC Ray. Scrapbooks are really cool. I got tons of them. I got to organize the scrapbooks. I feel like I should scan these photos. I was telling Robin I have this fantasy of creating like this virtual realm and having all these photos of these people sort of captured with AI and then stick them in a Sim City and then give them these attributes so they can interact with one another, throw in some NPCs, and I can drop in like God every now and then and see all these people doing their lives. Anyway, it was just a weird fantasy, but yes, scrapbooks are cool. Aaron L, what's going on, Aaron? Yeah, it is. Charlie is hot in Biloxi. Does that mean you're on a roll at the old casinos there, Charlie? Are the slots hot in Biloxi? Meow meow. Meow meow. Meow meow. Green Eyed Crow. Check it in. You're my family. All right. I love that, RC. WC. Cool. Sandra says, just attended a funeral for my father's cousin's wife. Was the last of their generation to pass at age 96. We got the Queen of Speed, Nora Rashid. She's with us. Pedal to the metal. Amy Gill. I was not either. Who's, I guess, is in reference to my comments. I was a Rolling Stone. Wandering Star. It's interesting. I wonder how many of you like me in that regard. Hi, Denise Walker. Good to see you. This world is not my own, just passing through. Kind of feel the same way, Charlie. Chris Frog, happy Monday. Chris is talking to us from the future. How's the future, Chris? What's it like? Let's see. Who else do we have here? A wayfarer means wanderer. Yeah, that's what I feel like. I feel like a wayfarer. It's all good. Cash of the Masha. What's happening? That show was awesome. Really enjoyed it. It was a good show. Meow meow. I was just talking about what you're talking about. I don't know. It's in the air for me. I'm personally, but maybe it is for the rest of us too. Cynthia Cluth. Yeah, my grandparents were my only parents, real parents. So I get it. I don't understand how messed up things have gotten. That is a really, really salient comment. Yeah. Barbara had family reunions. Good. Small, but hey, it's the quality, not the quantity. Tondar, I wonder about the recently forgotten generations, people born a little over 100 years ago, gone forever. I've been thinking the same thing. I've been thinking about. I just look at all. I go through the internet, and I was going through like World War II photos. Guys that fought in the Pacific War with Japan. Like, where did these people go? Right, and their families and their friends and all the lives they've had. It's just like it's mind blowing. It's like we literally live on a body of bones. If you really think about it, we live on a body. We live on a body, and I know who's that guy who basically says that is it Mud Fossil U that everything is just built on bones here. I could kind of see that, right? But I thought the same thing, Tondar. I'm kind of flabbergasted by this film, this movie called Life, and all these other people that have been here and their families and their stories and their struggles and their triumphs. And it's just, man, it's kind of overwhelming, actually. My ex-husband says the Antifa people have no soul. I would agree with him. They don't feel very soulful to me. Kate O is in Japan. She's tuning in from the future as well. Awesome. So hi to Misaki over there. I get regular updates from Masaki on Japan. So I feel like I know what's going on in Japan at a much deeper level. Let's see who else we have here. Patricia Just Be Me. Good to have you here. Big dog is dying. Rough week. It's always hard, man. It's always hard when you lose a family member. And pets are just, the thing with pets is that, when they go, right? Um, when they go, it's just pure. I've mentioned this before. Like sometimes if you have a relative that passes away, sometimes, or a friend who passed away, sometimes they're not always the best people. And you kind of have to remember the best parts of them and slightly blot out the lesser parts of them. But every now and then you say, yeah, but he can be a real asshole, right? Yeah, he was a real asshole at times. But you can never really say that about your pet, unless it's a cat. And every now and then a cat can fall into, I love that cat, but he can be a real asshole at times. But for the most part, pets are just pure love. All right. 2012 Inception Point, Age of Pisces. I think that makes sense. That makes sense. Uh, I would roll with that, Harriet. Gucci to Ghost. What's happening? Jake's in the house. Good to see you, Jake. Yes, we are here, Catherine. I'm going to put this comment up here. I'm almost relieved my parents aren't around for the state of our world right now. I definitely felt that about my father. He would be fucking losing his shit. He would be losing his shit. So I'd agree with that. Aha. The sun seemed extra bright white today. I felt it too, Ryan. I felt it as well. It was like, uh, yeah, yeah. Let's swap that bulb out. Let's go for the 1,000-watt bulb, shall we? Sure, they're ready for it. Okay, screw it in. Let's see. Who else do we have? The harp that they had up in Garcona, Alaska, they retired that. That thing it belongs to the University of Alaska now, and they just kind of run their own little experiments and shit on it. No, harp has got there's literally hundreds of harps, and from what I understand, they look like little golf balls. Look like golf balls. That's how they run harp now. So yeah, there's more than one harp for sure. Let's see who else do we have here. Steve Borg Resistance in the house. What's going on, Steve? Let's see. All right, we got a little esoteric from another Steve. Thor says, I remember somewhere the Egyptians recognized 13 chakras, some beyond the physical. So the higher realm seems possible. We should be able to rise and fall within a greater range than most. I agree with you 100%, Steve. It's a great comment. Myths of Magic Rising. Hello back at you. The Tennessee Outlaw Chemtrails. That's what I've heard. That is what I've heard for sure. Yes. Veronica's got plans, but we'll replay the show when she gets home. All right. Well, what are your plans, Veronica? You feel like sharing your plans with us? Melissa Stanton from Florida. She's checking in. And the president of Slovakia. So yeah, the president of Slovakia shot. The helicopter went down theoretically, right? Wasn't there an Irish politician as well? There was an assassination attempt on an Irish politician. Now, I don't know if it's true or not, but apparently there was an assassination attempt on Trump in New Jersey. I can't prove it. I just heard it. Ojos Azules. What's happening? Good to see you, Ojos. Kelly B's here. It's another one of our wanderers. Feels like a lot of you guys are wanderers. A lot of you guys are kind of like that. That's my sense. Curtis Moonflower. Hey, Curtis. Julia Payne, another person checking in from the future. I love it. Napoleon with his 500 soldiers. Napoleon spent the night in the Great Pyramid in Egypt. And apparently he was so shaken by the experience. And when he came out of it, they asked him, "So what was it like?" And he was like, "I am not talking about it. I will never talk about it." Like it was almost too much for him, right? Napoleon had met his match inside the Great Pyramid. And just before he died, he almost talked about it. And then he said to the people that were present, "Never mind. You'd never understand." Peter Biome, what's happening, Peter? We almost saw a weave getting snatched off of someone's head in Congress. I honestly don't want to pay for the Jerry Springer show on the floor of Congress. That was something else, right? Like that whole cat fight. That was it was embarrassing. I just got to say, it was kind of humorous and kind of funny, but it was embarrassing because that's just like the energy that's kind of running the country right now. And they couldn't restore any order whatsoever. You had these three banshees just screaming at you. Of course, what's her name? Marjorie Taylor Greene's a Gemini. So she's always going to poke. She's always going to poke, right? That's her style. She's always going to poke. And once she got, what's her name? Crockett riled up, she just said, calm down. Calm down. Like she had her all riled up. And she's telling her to calm down. Then, of course, you have AOC, the Libra. She's a Libra. And she tries to come in and strike that comment from the record. Trying to be all social justice queen bitch, right? It's disgusting. Total Libra. She's got Mars in Libra too. So just got to come right in, with the hammer, right? But it was embarrassing, I have to say. Totally embarrassing. I wish I could understand how the world could tolerate so much agony. I agree with you. I agree with you. I think my answer to that question is manifold. Number one, we have been desensitized so much that scenes like what's happening, especially in Gaza, are just another thing that we have to process. And that's part of it, right? There's a desensitization. How much violence have we seen? Right? We've seen so much violence. 2020 was such a violent year. We see violence all the time on Twitter or on World Star Hip Hop or wherever, right? The violence meter has been turned up to 11. Well, I would say 11, say 8. It's pretty high. So we've become used to the violence. It's desensitized us. Then there is the oversaturation. Like we are oversaturated. We have way too much information to process at any given time. Now, in as much as it's a challenge to process everything, it also represents the ability to, how do I say this, perform our own version of machine learning, which is being flooded with all these different pieces of material all the time so that we have more complex associations with this realm and perhaps others. That's the upside. The downside is just way too much information. We have an event and we're like, oh, and let's say it's a real event, like say Hawaii, Lahaina, or East Palestine. and we have this terrible event, and it's like, well, holy shit, is anybody do anything about this? Can anybody help these people? And then we look at the the circumstances surrounding everything, and it just feels fishy, and we've lost faith in the government, and we've lost faith in the media. Nobody tells the truth anymore. Nobody tells the truth anymore in the mainstream world, in terms of politicians, Washington, global leaders, and for the most part, the media. Nobody tells the truth, and that is absolutely psychotic. It's psychotic. So we're living in a psychotic world. And how do you process that? When you see these babies that are being just, blown to bits and maimed and all the other atrocities that are happening over there, right? It's just another piece of the overall psychosis that we have to tend to and deal with. And because we live in this collective psychosis where nobody is telling the truth, and if nobody's telling the truth, then nobody is standing up for the truth. And then we look around and it's like, okay, we're the adults, right? There are no adults. There are just people that are compromised and shilling and basically inhumane because they've lost touch with their soul. That's what we're dealing with. And then the few humans that are out there, the few representatives of our species that seem to be capable of understanding what's going on, well, they're absolutely marginalized or they're removed. That's what's happening. And that's why when this is going on, people, number one, have to factor it in and filter it in with every other thing that's out there. And that's excluding the drama in their personal lives, whether it's with their family or their own sort of sense of well being. So there's that. And then there's the desensitization of violence because we see it all the time, right? We become inured to it. And then we're basically dealing with a psychopathic world where nobody tells the truth. And that's why it happens. There's going to be a backlash. And it is not far. It is not far. There will be a backlash. Because even the most, I would say, impotent and deluded societies at some point have a breaking point, right? They have a breaking point. And there will be a breaking point with the Middle East. It'll happen. The breaking point is going to happen. We looked at Israel's chart last week, and Uranus is conjuncting Israel's sun. And, it goes back and forth, right? Uranus is just doing like the sandpaper effect on Israel's sun. So it may not happen this week or next month or 3 months from now, but as Uranus conjuncts Israel's natal sun in the natal chart, the situation becomes explosive. It becomes radical. It becomes revolutionary. And remember, Uranus in Taurus is in its detriment, right? So there's nothing evolutionary about it. In fact, if anything, it's de-evolutionary, right? It is de-evolutionary. And that's a whole other aspect that we have to look at through that lens. Are we witnessing the behavior of a group of people that, for all intents and purposes, is de-evolutionary? That's a really important question to ask. And it always comes down to, well, they have the right to protect themselves. Sure. I guess every country has the theoretical right to protect themselves. But at what point does protecting oneself become something completely different. And I think most of us, if we're being honest and clear with ourselves, know where that line is. We know where that line is, right? It's the people that are theoretically above us, and use the word theoretically above us, who somehow manage to not know where that line is, or they conveniently overlook it because somebody has lined their pockets, or somebody's got some incriminating video on them with somebody who is, quite frankly, vastly underage and doing things that they don't want the rest of the world to see. So that's why this happens. That's why it happens. And it really boils down to the fact that we live in a psychopathic world where nobody tells the truth and nobody's willing to stand up for the truth, because when it does happen, you're punished. You're punished. And that's why. Okay. Cynthia says our country is hanging on because of the Second Amendment, large population. I don't disagree with that. That is a major point. Listen to this. Kato, being in Japan is driving home how terrible it is in the U.S. It's all I hear from Misaki. How clean it is, how polite the people are, how good the food at 7-Eleven is. I swear to God. It honestly doesn't look half bad. And it's cheap. Chaos Engagement. Can't wait for the DNC convention. Yeah, don't they want to put it on Zoom, don't they? They want to put that thing on Zoom. I'm with you. That's a replay of 1968 with the Chicago Democratic Convention, because it's going to be in Chicago. I'm with you. That's going to be something to watch. Peter says, no matter one thing's for sure, no matter who wins, they're a Zionist. It's true. Joe Biden did a video. I can't do it, Biden. He did a video where he said, I'm a Zionist. I think it was back in the early 90s. He had no bones about it. Let's see, who else do we have here? Let's see. Anytime we see Biden, we may as well accept that we are seeing a hologram or a clone when needed. It definitely feels like, we're dealing with like a latex puppet. Back in the days, they were called synthetic robotoids, and then clones. And the synthetic robotoids are different than the clones. Let's see, who else do we have here? Butler's jerseys are selling out. He's the number one jersey in the NFL. The speech was incredible. It's an incredible speech. Clear, focused, on point. That is somebody who is integrated. That guy knows who he is. He knows who he is. He knows where his faith is. He understands the deeper operating principles of his life, and he doesn't deviate from them. It was a beautiful thing to see. Beautiful thing to see. All right, let's see. Who else do we have? Gemini season is President Meow Wow's. I love it. Platinum Happiness 2024. I'm a lot like you. Life doesn't feel the same. It's hard to get excited about anything or feel joy. I agree with you. Something changed. Something changed. Maybe it was 2012. Maybe it was 2012. I'm trying to I'm trying to feel when the change occurred. Let me just see if I can place this historically. Let me just think about this. Let me think about this. I'm trying to think back during the 8 years of Obama. The 8 years of Obama, I was very rebellious. I did not like the regime. So I had a raison d'etre, um, which I was very fired up about. I think the mechanism for all of this probably starts on 9/11. That's what I think. The mechanism for all of this starts in 9/11 because 9/11 is it's a magical with an ICKAL ritual and it's dark. And it did something to this country that really changed us. And it made us in some ways more gullible and dependent. And we bought into, I think, an enormous lie at an enormous cost. And the reverberation of that lie is hitting us. And, this is something I thought about over the weekend as well. And I promise we'll get into the astrology. I promise. We're kind of hitting on a little bit. But, a lot of these people who are here in this country now, I don't know what the exact figure is. Some people estimated to be between 3.5 million to 7 million people. A lot of those people came from places that we bombed the shit out of. Afghanistan, Libya. I don't know if there's any Iraqis. There's even places like Somalia, where we kind of got involved with NATO in Somalia. Uh, a lot of those people that that are here are from those countries, and I'm sure they're really fucking pissed. That they are really fucking pissed, and that they would have no problem delivering blows to the great Satan. And the problem is that neither you nor I or anybody else that would be watching this show was the person pressing the buttons on the drones. Neither you or I or anybody else watching this show was the one who said, okay, we're going to send these troops over there or we're going to do a regime change and we're going to bring democracy. We didn't do that. In fact, there were some of us who were adamantly against it, which I was. I was writing my congressman during that time. So, no, don't go there. Don't go there. Do not go to Iran. Don't go. And I'd list my reasons why. Of course, they didn't listen to me. And this is the problem, is that a lot of us were not in favor of any of those things that happened. And now we have to suffer the consequences, theoretically, for the assholes that were. And that could be very problematic. Very, very problematic. Peter says, personally, I don't want to live under a woke theocracy or conservative Christian theocracy. Yeah, I'm with you. We're going to talk about Robespierre, who had a very interesting uh, Robespierre had a very interesting paradigm that he was going to institute as part of his reign as dictator. We're going to get into that a little bit. Let's see. Start with Puffy and then end the show on a good note. Do you guys want me to go into Puffy's chart? Why don't we do that? I'm wearing my Buggles glasses. I got new ones on the way, by the way. All right, let's take a look at Sean Combs' chart. Okay, so why don't we go into just Astro theme? We'll Astro theme this. I think we have a birth time for Puffy. And then we'll backtrack. We'll get into the chart of the moment, and we'll get into the rest of the show. Oh, we don't have a birth time. Damn it. Damn it. Damn it, Janet. All right, let's just put it up here. Hold on. Let's see. Here we go. Okay. So Puffy is a Scorpio, and his true node is in Pisces. South node's on Virgo, right, which would be over here. I think the thing that is perhaps the most interesting aspect of his chart is Mars, which is at 29 Capricorn. So he has Pluto on his Mars, and he's had Pluto on his Mars for a while. And Pluto Mars aspects can be very potent. So the individual may feel a great deal of power, right, with the Pluto Mars aspect. That said, it could also be quite revealing when it comes to how that person has used their energy, right? Because Pluto exposes shit. That's what it does. It exposes shit. So if you have a Pluto Mars conjunction and you're somebody who has lived a impeccable life, let's say, well, that Pluto Mars conjunction is going to be very powerful, and you might be able to use it for some really interesting purposes. If you were political, or you had political aspiration, a Mars Pluto conjunction, especially at 29 Capricorn, could just catapult you right into a race, right? And all of a sudden, the momentum would just kind of take over. But it's also a test. Like Pluto transits are a test, and they're not always death and destruction and doom and gloom. Sometimes Pluto transits can give you a lot of juice, and then you are tasked with, well, what are you going to do with that now? What are you going to do with all this power? How are you going to handle it? So it's going to be interesting when Pluto retrogrades back over his Mars, because that's going to happen, right? The last station of Pluto and Capricorn is going to hit Diddy's Mars. Diddy, Puffy, Sean, whatever you want to call him. And that's going to, I don't think it's going to go well for him. I don't think it's going to go well for him. Now, one of the reasons why nothing has happened to him up to now is because this is a guy that is protected. And I'm not talking about protected in like a angelic sense. No, he has hit on a lot of people. A lot of people. So consider him to be a version of Epstein. Cameras, videotapes, trafficking, drug deals, you name it. He's got names, he's got dates, he's got the bodies, right? He knows where the bodies are buried, which is why nothing has happened to him. Now, I've heard some people speculate that he's also tied into the intel agencies. I wouldn't have a problem with that. If you look at the roots of the CIA, it comes right out of Skull and Bones. That's where the CIA is born. They have the OSS, Skull and Bones, and CIA. And when you understand what they do in Skull and Bones, it is about ritual initiation. It's very dark. So, baked into the whole idea of the Skull and Bones is kind of this occult aspect of the intelligence. They've always been a cult. Like John Dee, his nickname was 007. He was considered to be the first sort of great British spy. He was 007, and he was also an occultist. Ian Fleming, who wrote about James Bond, was also an occultist. So this idea of these intelligence agencies and these secret societies or these occult organizations, they're kind of hand in glove. They're mixed together because a lot of the principles are the same, right? Secrecy is a big deal in both worlds. It's a very big deal in both worlds. Compartmentalization is a big deal in both worlds. You have people that have dual identities, and you could see that in the lodges. Person has one identity in a lodge, another identity somewhere else. In fact, they even go by different names. So the connections between the two are they're not that dissimilar. So I wouldn't think there would be uh, out of the question that he would at the very least be an informant. Um, what's his name as an informant? Oh man, I got his picture right in my brain. But I wouldn't be surprised if he's an informant, and maybe it's one of those things where it's like, okay, we got the goods on you. You just better give us shit when we need it, right? Uh, or he just be getting a check from him. Now, here's where I think he gets tricky for Diddy. It's Pluto. It's Pluto. Now, nothing has happened to him. This video was released where he was beating the shit out of his what's her name, Cassidy, right? He's beating the shit out of her and dragging her down the hallway. I mean, so that's come out, and now all of a sudden he's really contrite, and now he wants to make amends and do all these other things because he was shown how horrible his behavior was. It's almost like he's pleading to a lesser crime. Pleading to a lesser crime. Like, okay, let me bundle up all the other things that I've done and let me roll it into this event and let me show how remorseful I am and let me demonstrate to the world that I'm going to get help, that I'm going to go into rehab and I'm going to get counseling, which is essentially what he's doing. And I think what he's doing is he's copying to a less, and that's not to say that what he did was a lesser crime. I mean, what he did was pretty terrible. But based on some of these other things that we've heard uh, with underage people and humiliation and all, like, yeah, it's not good. But compared to a litany of these things, it's clearly a lesser crime. It's the crime that he can cop to. It's the socially acceptable theoretical crime. And then if he goes and does all these things, then once he emerges, he'll be a new man and he'll have found God, maybe. and he'll be deeply, even more remorseful than he is now. Now, let me say this. I will say this, that I don't think anybody is beyond redemption. And I know that may sound controversial. And I'm not here as a bleeding heart for Puffy. Oh, well, he just needs some good rehabilitation and some rehab, and he needs some mentoring, and he'll be just fine. No, I don't mean that. I mean that in his soul, he can be redeemed. Now, whatever he has to go through in order to experience that redemption, that's another story altogether. Because my feeling about God, right? That's not just my feeling, it's my experience. That if you want to get clear and you want to be absolved of whatever sins or malfortune that you have uh, expressed in your life and um, acted upon others in a way that was painful, whatever, right? Before you get clear, you're going to feel it. You're going to feel what other people have felt. That's just the name of the game. It's like, okay, just so you are clear and you understand that you're never going to do this again, you're going to feel exactly what they felt. And I may even turn up the dial a little bit on you just so you really get the message. Because I have been there. I know what it feels like. I know what it feels like. And you never want to go back there, ever. Because then once you're through it, you are eternally grateful for the thing that you went through. And more than likely you'll never do it again. Right. If you do, then you're just a lost cause. So that's why I mean what I mean by that. I don't believe anybody is beyond redemption. But the the process and the act of redemption isn't just a waving of a magic wand. Okay, here you go. You're a good little boy now. Go back into society. No, you're gonna have to work for it. Um, I wonder. I wonder if he is going to be taken out because again, he has had uh, so much cover. You would think that everything that's come out and uh, Cassidy's testimony and everything that was part of the transcript for the lawsuit that he settled the day it came out, he didn't contest one iota of anything she said. He said, here's the money. See ya. And everything else that's come out since then. He's been out there like a free man in Paris. It's because he's protected. But that might change. Once Pluto gets in here, it's going to retrograde. It's going to hit his Mars again. That's the period that when does that come up? I think in October. That's the period that well he has no choice in the matter. But if you're looking from the sidelines, that's the period that I would look at in terms of what happens in his life. October. Now, two things can occur. Either he's taken out or he goes through that kind of inferno that I was talking about. But then he has to come in and he has that square with Pluto and Saturn. And I just think that could be very intense. Not only that, but it comes in and squares his Mercury at 4 degrees. So there's a Pluto Mercury square, Pluto Saturn square. And then Saturn is going to hit his true node in Pisces. What, by next week? Goes retrograde and it comes back again. Okay, so here's my prediction. If he isn't taken out, he's doing jail time. Easy. Now, he's just offered up this public apology, blah, 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 right? Public apology. But I think he's in trouble. I think he's in big time trouble. Not only that, but he's got Neptune. If we were to put Neptune over here, he's got Neptune opposing Pluto in his chart. And we've talked about this Neptune-Pluto opposition. And of course, Neptune will do a little retrograde dance here, come back into the more exact placement of the opposition. But that happens around 43. How old is he? He's 44. So started when he was 43. It'll go through till he's 44. And then where's his Saturn? He's got a ways for the Saturn opposition. Saturn in Scorpio. That's a ways away, right? Yeah. So no, it's 53. Is he 50? He's 53. Yeah. So I'm sorry, my bad. 53, 54, because he's already gone through the Saturn opposition. That's Neptune. So Neptune, Pluto opposition comes in, depending on your age, 52, 53, maybe finally 54, right? It's a really big opposition. And for anybody that goes through it, it feels like your world is coming apart. Because Pluto is the silver cord that we're attached to. In this body, in this lifetime, Pluto is the silver cord. Because it represents death and theoretically life and theoretically rebirth. Right. So when you have Neptune on the other side of it, which would be over here, opposing Pluto, what is happening? Well, you're being asked to let go of something very significant to you. It's like a psychic death. And the whole idea is that it should be a dress rehearsal for what will come one day. So for him, if he was really going to get through this, the best thing he could do, this is the best thing this guy could do, is he should come clean and let it all go. Come clean, let it all go. That is his only hope here. And if he does that, he could have a redemptive moment. Why? Because Saturn is going to hit his true node and activate his true node in Pisces. So theoretically, this is his come to Jesus moment. Dude's going to have to get on his knees and absolutely, he just can't beg to the public for forgiveness. He can't do it. It's not going to work. And when Pluto squares his Saturn, that is judgment. That is heavy judgment because it's fixed sign. And squaring Mercury in Scorpio, heavy thoughts. I would be surprised if he's suicidal during that time. That's not, that's the beginning of next year. If he makes it that long, if he makes it through Pluto retrograding back on his Mars, but he needs to let go. And again, we'll call it the spiritual geometry of the process is the Neptune opposition to Pluto is all about letting go, the metaphoric death, the psychic death. And then once you do, and this has happened the same time with everybody, there's a Neptune trine. So the Neptune trine is the letting go. It's like, oh, okay. If I let go, then I am, carried by the waters of grace, by the currents of really, and that's what that is. Because we're all going to have to go through it. We're all going to have that kind of white knuckle moment, right? I watched it with my mother. God bless her soul. She had the hardest time with it. It's difficult, really difficult, hard, really hard. At the end of the day, what are you going to do though? You can't hold on. You can't. And her um, survival instinct and her ability to power through situations in past situations, even overcome, being at death's door multiple times, right? She couldn't do it. She couldn't muster the will to overcome what was going on inside of her. Couldn't do it. And, we tried everything to help her, you know, be more at ease with her state, but it was very difficult. But this is what this is about. At some point in this opposition, picture Neptune right here and trining right up to Neptune. It's like, okay, I'm letting go. There for the grace of God go I. Let go, let God. You guys know the mantras, right? So that's what's happening in this dude's life. He's got Pluto retrograding on his Mars. He's having Saturn coming to his true node. It's a come to Jesus moment. Probably the best thing that's ever happened to him. Don't stop here. Go all in, dude. Go all in. You'll probably spend the rest of your life in prison, but you may become a free man. You may become a free man. I was watching this football game, and it was an old one from I think it was like 1980, and it was the San Diego Chargers, which is the Oakland Raiders, and I loved that late '70s, early '80s version of the Chargers with Don Coryell, and he had a running back named Chuck Muncie, and Chuck was an amazing athlete, really an incredible athlete. There were very few players of his size and his speed that could do the things that Chuck did. And unfortunately, Chuck was a Pisces. And unfortunately, he had a major drug issue. Like, Chuck snorted a lot of coke. And he had problems with weed and alcohol. And he kept getting suspended. And eventually he went to Cal Berkeley, and eventually somebody found him homeless and passed out, I think, in the parking lot near the stadium there, which is where he had his glory days. He was almost a Heisman Trophy winner. And I think he was also trying to sell like 2 pounds of coke. Not them when they found him, but it was kind of in his game plan. And he wound up going to prison, and he said it was the best thing that ever happened to him. And when Chuck came out, he dedicated himself to working with kids, Boys and Girls Club, and he started his own foundation, and he was helping young high school athletes and, you know, helping them stay on their path. And, he Chuck straightened his life out, which was great. He died though. He died at 53. He had a heart attack. I mean, shit, the guy snorted a shit ton of coke. Of course, it's going to damage his heart. Right. But the reason I'm bringing it up, he said going to prison was the best thing that ever happened to him because he sorted out his life. He was out in a year and a half, had good behavior. I think this is what this guy has to do. If he is going to reclaim his soul, he's going to have to cop to everything. Everything. Not just being a caveman with his girlfriend. It's not going to work. It is not going to work. So if you're listening, Puffy, turn yourself in, lay it all out. Lay it all out. Because there's no way that you're going to navigate through this and game the system. Right? This is where your game ends. You don't have enough game when it comes to God. Sorry. Sorry, you may be a big player in your world, but you're a minor cast member when it comes to the big picture. So that's because if he doesn't, it's going to get very difficult for him, and I would not be surprised if he is taken out. There you go. There's your Sean Puff Daddy Combs quick read of the chart. So let's see. I always like to look up. So Matthew McConaughey, Kathy Griffin, Bethany Frankel. She's one of the housewives of whatever. Let's see who else. Ralph Macchio, Laura Bush, Robert Mapplethorpe all share the same birthday. Horoscopes having the same aspect of the Venus conjunction Jupiter orb 0.33. Anne Hathaway, the Antichrist. That's the Antichrist chart from 1962. Matthew McConaughey. So they're born on the same day. Probably the same year because he's got the same aspect. Halsey, Steven Spielberg, RuPaul, Roman Polanski. He might have more than a little in common with Roman Polanski. Jane Birkin, the singer, G-Eazy, Trent Reznor, Liz Green, the astrologer, and Charles Baudelaire. How about that? All right. There's your Puffy report. Thanks, Steve, for suggesting I do that earlier. I think it was a good move. Let's do the old chart of the moment, shall we? Let's see where we are. All right. What time is it? 8:10. Yeah, let's do this. Okay. Let's look at where we are. So that's the old chart of the moment there. And, what I think I've been experiencing over this weekend, just for me personally, is the moon. The moon in Libra, and it's conjuncting the South Node. Right. So the South Node is currently on my natal moon. So I have been looking at the past. I have been feeling things about the past, and not only just the South Node, but here we are with the moon in Libra. So the South Node is the past, and we're looking back at a time in our life, or time in our lives, where for again, sometimes I think, we look to the past with rose-colored glasses. I think a lot of generations do that. Although I don't think my parents looked back in their childhood with rose-colored glasses. They had some hard-ass childhoods. But this is what this is like right now with this Moon South Node conjunction. And we're looking, just for me personally, it's about a time in the past where things seem to have more balance and they seem to have more inherent beauty, right? Like there was a time when cars looked really cool and really sexy and really elegant, particularly the late 60s. Some of those cars, you go back further than that, some of those cars in the 1950s are freaking, works of art. Really, they are. They're beautiful, right? But that's what happens when we look back with the moon in Libra and the South Node. We're generally looking back at a time that was also a bit more harmonious. And for the most part, I think people treated each other better. Now people we have this we've curated this culture of cruelty that being anonymous on the internet has allowed you to do, right? So I go to this website every now and then. What is it? Godlike Productions. And I go there every now and then and I'll see a thread that looks interesting. And somewhere within the first 4 comments, somebody is being a fucking sociopath. Right. And then those comments will just litter and just absolutely kill a thread like, kudzu or red algae. And it's like, okay, well, this started off promising. And then the miscreants got involved. I think a lot of those people are trolls, but the same concept applies where people are being curated into a culture of cruelty because anonymity allows them to be cruel. This is what's happened. So there was a time where we didn't have that, and we had to deal with people either face to face, or we had to talk to them, or we had to write them a letter. So all pre-internet stuff. And I suppose if you were going to be a dick, you could be a dick behind somebody's back. That would be not out of the question, right? But if you had to deal with somebody on a day-to-day basis, more than likely you were not going to exercise your inner miscreant. Like you didn't have a burner account so that you could say things that you wanted to say but couldn't say otherwise. Or maybe it's not a burner account at all. Maybe it's just who you are. So we've curated that culture, and the anonymity or the semi-anonymity of the internet has done that, right? So when we look at this is more about a time where we didn't do that, where we treated each other better, or we treated each other with some degree of respect. Because we didn't, there would be repercussions, real repercussions. If you wanted to be friends with somebody, you had to treat them like a friend and, have shared values or, shared character traits or whatever they were. Right. And I think that this moon, at least for me, I don't know where you guys have been the last 24 hours, but it's brought this up for me. And just this idea of this passing world. And yeah, I can find some things about this world that do interest me. One of them being the thing that I'm doing now and sharing my time with you and you sharing your time with me. This is probably one of the most important exercises in my life, to be honest with you, because it gives me a sense of purpose, a sense of community, because I know a lot of you. And it, and to some extent, even creativity. right? So these are the things that keep me alive and keep me in the game. Um, and I hope that some of you have that as well, because as we were talking about earlier, it's very hard to maintain a sense of enthusiasm or a sense of joie de vivre in a world that is literally deconstructing before our very eyes. I think it's one of the greatest challenges of being a human. And then you throw that whole kind of psychopathic layer on top of it, where nobody in power tells the truth. Nobody in the media tells the truth. And it's like, well, isn't somebody here responsible? I'll tell you the one person, even now and then, I think he kind of goes into some superfluous territory every now and then. But the one person who seems to get this and understand this is Tucker Carlson. He gets it. He understands it, right? He is talking about important issues, important questions, because he wants his kids to live in a world where they are not going to be some kind of techno feudal serf. And even though theoretically he comes from an elite background, he's clearly not siding with that affiliation. He's not. So I think right now, right, with the moon here and the South Node, and we have this inconjunct with Saturn going on, and the opposition with Mars and the opposition with Aries. Um, I think it would be a good thing to meditate on things that you can bring from your past that do have some degree of meaning. Like the past on one level is over, and we can't really go back to it. But there are things from those periods of time, whatever they are, that you can bring forward. I'll just throw this out, and I know it sounds silly, but because it does go back to like when I was growing up, like macrame. Like, who does macrame now? Well, I'm not sure. I'm sure some people do, but that might have been something that you might have done at one point in time, and maybe you want to bring that back. See what it feels like to do it. Maybe you've got a new take on it. So there are things that we can go into the past and bring back with us and say, you know what? This gave me great enjoyment when I did this. Maybe I can have this in my life, but in a different kind of way. So I feel like that's a reasonable exercise with this South Node and the conjunction with the moon. And it also feels important. This is what I attempt to do in my own personal life, is when I go out into the world, I see myself as uh, an ambassador of potentiality, right? So what I attempt to do with the general public is I attempt to be as respectful and kind and courteous as possible, because I feel like those are qualities in this world that are being chucked by the wayside, right? So I kind of go out of my way to do that. Like, I think it's important, because if we lose those things, we lose the civility in the day-to-day rituals that allow us to have a certain codification with each other, right? Whether it's thank you, no thank you, yes please, you're welcome, whatever, right? Like, I do my best to stay in touch with that stuff, no matter who I'm dealing with, because that is the social lubricant, right? When you do that, then the other person theoretically responds in kind. There's a downstream effect. So maybe this is something that you can meditate on with this moon and the South Node conjunction. How do you show up in the world? And you can say, well, I do all these things, but it doesn't matter. People are still rude. People are still assholes. And people are still unkind. You never know. You just never know. You may be the one person in a particular moment where you do something or say something, and that could have such a profound effect on another person. And you could change the course of their life just by being remotely kind. Right? You don't have to roll the red carpet out from everybody, right? You can still be your own person. You can choose to interact at whatever level you want to, right? But in the world today, I feel like these are qualities that are being cast aside and um, being replaced by a wholly synthetic version of values. That's just me. That's kind of how I roll, right? If I have to, turn the hot water on with somebody, can I do it? Sure, of course I can. I had an experience last week when I had to get this $300 deposit back from this guy that was working on my truck, and I had to turn the hot water on with the guy because he was trying to fuck me over. And like, I can be really nice and respectful, but you're not going to fuck me over. It's not going to happen. So, you can always resort if you need to bringing out your inner asshole, right? But that doesn't have to be the first line of engagement with people. That's just me. You can live accordingly. I just feel like these are values that the world has taken for granted. What's interesting here is the Saturn in conjunct, right? Just right now, just tonight, we have the Saturn in conjunct in Pisces. It's 1 degree off of Diddy's true node, which is why I was talking about it. And it's almost as if there is this sort of hidden expectation, right? Like, I'll take a page out of Christopher Nolan's cosmology. That right now Saturn is playing the role of the watcher, right? That to me, and Saturn in Pisces will make Saturn in Pisces the Godhead, the tribulation and the judgment, because it's clearly coming for Diddy, right? It's clearly coming for Diddy. And it's interesting because Saturn in Pisces has brought up these fascinating religious nuggets, right? These nuggets of faith, like Harrison Butker, which we'll talk about at the end of the show, which will be the good note. But it's almost like Saturn here is kind of watching, right? It's like, yeah, okay. Can you be the same person with somebody you deem to be important as somebody who you would deem to be basic or average or remedial, right? That's part of it. That's part of it. That's Saturn back there, like watching. Okay. How do you roll? Let's see how you roll. How do you roll? And it's just now, right? Like it's just if we were to get up tomorrow, that moon would be out of the orb for the inconjunct. So it feels like to me that this aspect is speaking to me and to us directly in this moment. And wherever you are on the spectrum of God or, prime creator or logos or the most high, wherever you are in that spectrum, right? To me, this Saturn and the inconjunct with the moon is clearly illustrating that there is a force that watches over, right? Watches over how we interact and how we process our emotions, particularly with each other. And it's just now, right? Right now, tomorrow morning, that moon will be probably what at maybe 24, and it's out of the orb. So it's no longer in the inconjunct. Now, it could also be Big Brother, but we're gonna take it up a notch. We're gonna go to a higher level. All right, let's talk about the opposition. Again, these are all. I think we should probably pay more attention to Mars and the true node versus the opposition with the moon, which again will be kind of out of that orb tomorrow. But we talked about this on, I think it might have been Wednesday's Astro Weather, when I got into this idea of will, and I'm on the record that I don't believe in free will. I think we talked about it on last Sunday night too. I'm just going to bring it up again and do a Reader's Digest version. I don't believe we have free will. I believe that we are allowed to make choices that masquerade as will, and but it's not the same as what I would call the true will. And what's interesting is that you see a little T inside the north node, and that's the T for the true node. So it just happens to be a bit of a coincidence. But the idea behind the true will is that the individual is aligned with the will of God. And when they are aligned with the will of God, it becomes their own will. And my very first spiritual teacher said that it was the greater will. Right? The greater will is actually your will, because you can do all these things that you couldn't have done otherwise. And then you sit back and go, well, those were silly choices I used to make. Now look what I'm involved in. Now I'm doing things I never thought I could ever do before. Or now I'm expressing a type of divinity that before my choices were limiting me from that. So from a higher perspective, I think that's where this is at with this Mars true node conjunction. Now, unfortunately, from a lower perspective, based on what happened with this helicopter in Iran and this, what was his name? Robert Fico, the Slovakian prime minister, who looks like he's going to be okay. He got shot. There's a lot of echoes here of, like, 1913. There's a lot of echoes of 1913 going on. Crown Prince Ferdinand. And I believe, who's the guy that shot him? What's his name? Gavril Princip. And he was part of the Black Hand, which was a secret group that was put together to overthrow Crown Prince Ferdinand. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, he was was he Montenegrin? Might have been Montenegrin. Anyway, it feels like that, right? It feels like we're kind of on the precipice of one of those moments where somebody gets taken out, somebody gets shot, and the next thing you know, everybody is, crying bloody murder, and it's time for retribution in war. Because this is what this feels like at a lower level, and it's an opposition, at least tonight, with the moon. Tomorrow, that south node is still going to be there, and this is peace, right? Theoretically, Libra is peace, and Aries is war. Aries is war. Aries is conflict. It is combat. And I'm not saying Aries is bad. Conflict and combat are a part of our human experience, and we have to be able to deal with them. We have to be able to deal with the entire spectrum of our experience. But it is, in some ways, more pronounced than a peaceful resolution. Now, the memory of peace is in here. The memory of peace is in here. But the action of the moment is here now. And it feels very aggressive. So we have two layers of this, right? We have this whole idea of action, energy, manifestation, conflict, and will. Aries is the will. So I'm just looking at this from two levels of the will, right? The higher level, which is the true level or the true will, your greater will, where you are connected to it, and man, your life works. Your life works. You make the right choices, and if you make the wrong choices, guess what happens? You get over them quickly, and you understand the error and your mistake or your judgment, and you learn something from it, and then you quickly navigate and you're back on course again. Right? Yeah, that was dumb, that was stupid, or or I could have had a better response to that situation. And then you're back on course again. Because when you get into that place and you start making decisions from that place and your life starts going in that direction, you don't want to get off. You're just like, hey, let's go. Right? This is great. Where else can we take this thing? Because that at times has been my experience. When you're really in that pocket, right? And you know that what you're doing is connected to your higher self, really, which is the manifestation of God. And you're like right there on the beam. It feels great. And you know what it feels like. I know each and every one of you has had a taste of that. If you're honest with yourself, you know those moments. And guess what else happens? Things become effortless. You may have to work, but you don't mind the work, right? Why? Because you're filled with a sense of joy, a sense of exploration, a sense of creativity, a sense of higher purpose. Like the grunt work becomes part of the thing that you do, and you take it on because of the love that you're getting back from the thing that you're doing, because you know you're connected to this tractor beam, which is really your true will. And once you get on it, you don't want to get off. You don't want to go back. And I've had moments where clearly I backslid from those places. And, I'm doing my best to try to stay within the parameters of the beam. So that's where we are. What is the Sabian symbol for this? Let me just look at that. I'm curious. 14. Let's go 15. Let's go 15 Aries. I like this. I like this. Aries 15, an Indian weaving a ceremonial blanket, projecting into everyday living the realization of wholeness and fulfillment. I gotta throw. Can I do this? Hold on. Let me put it up on the other. I think this is perfect for what we're talking about here. This is perfect. And Rudyard comes through again. Here. All right. So this clicks into what we were talking about. In Christian tradition, one hears of Jesus's seamless robe. In Asia, one is told of the spiritual vesture of the perfect ones. The man who has attained the spiritual state is figuratively robed in the universe, and more precisely in the Milky Way, the great white robe of interwoven stars. This is the ultimate kind of weaving. There was also Penelope's weaving and unweaving, waiting for the return of her polarizing mate. The mind of the American woman in which these symbols took concrete form could think only of Indian weavers. So he's referring to Elsie Wheeler. And this is the one thing I have to say about Rudyard. He kind of disses Elsie Wheeler every now and then in his interpretation of what she came up with as a symbol. So he's kind of doing a remix on this. For the white man who is hungering for symbols of a state of living in total harmony with the universe, the traditional Indian can be glamorized as the answer to the inner emptiness of the city dweller surfeited with artificial values. At any rate, we may thus prefigure a future state of fulfillment in conscious harmony and unpossessive love. If this symbol comes to the consciousness of the inquirer after meaning, deliberately or through an aleatory act of revelation, like the act of throwing sticks to obtain an I Ching symbol, implied is the profound fact that every individual has his ultimate conscious task, the weaving of his immortal body, his Gnostic robe of glory. It may sound very mystical and far out, but there is a moment in every cycle when, in however small a degree, every individual may be confronted with the potentiality of a fulfilling act of self-realization and may ever so relatively find himself clothed in light for an instant. This is kind of what we're talking about. The fifth stage, the third fivefold sequence of symbols, ends the first of the 24 scenes. We are told by it that the fulfillment of desire is a possibility at whatever level and however incomplete a manner it may be experienced. But I really like this, right? It's sort of like this idea that there is an investiture of something that seems to be connected to kind of a primordial culture or an ancient time, but actually becomes something. It stands for something else, right? It's the creation of this body of light. Or I think it's fascinating, right? But it's a humble act, projecting into everyday living the realization of wholeness and fulfillment. So I think it's an interesting symbol for what we're talking about. All right. Let's get into some of these historical characters. Let's get into these historical characters. All right. I've been thinking a lot here. Let's do this. Hold on. Just do this. All right. Here it is, right here. Now, there's some very interesting crossovers with the digital guillotine. And I'll show you why. All right, I hope I can get this. This is an Australian website. Okay, let's do this. So we started to talk about this last week with this digital guillotine. And let's see. Right here. So this is from news.com.au. The digital guillotine, growing online movement, blackout targets biggest names in show business. A rapidly growing social media movement is going after the biggest names in show business, vowing to punish them with a digital guillotine. I want you to pay attention to some of the dates around this. A rapidly growing online movement has ramped up its attack on some of the biggest names in show business, urging supporters to subject celebrities to a digital guillotine. A-list actors Natalie Portman and Gwyneth Paltrow, reality megastars Kim Kardashian and Kylie Jenner, iconic pop star Madonna, and comedians Chelsea Handler and Sarah Silverman are on a long list of identified targets. That's a black book, by the way, and Robespierre kept a black book. The Blockout campaign urges social media users to block out more than 100 celebrities and any brands associated with them. Blockout was born out of anger of displays of wealth and glamour on show at the recent Met Gala in New York, the biggest event fashion industry calendar that's organized by Vogue magazine and overseen by its famed editor, Anna Wintour. TikTok influencer Haley Khalil, better known as Kaylee Bailey, online posted a video of herself at the glitzy star-studded event, mouthing words, "Let them eat cake," invoking the fabled words of Marie Antoinette during the French Revolution. Fury among the French people over the enormous gap between rich and poor led to the overthrow of the monarchy in 1793. That's somewhat true, but not entirely true, which we'll look at. Revolutionaries executed King Louis XVI and Marie Antoinette by guillotine. Khalil's utterance of the phrase was seen to highlight the obliviousness of celebrities and the wealth inequality, economic instability, and critical social issues. So this is an important day. Since the Met Gala on May 6th, this digital revolt has emerged as a digital guillotine where users are blocking celebrities and their brands. This not only hides their content, but also their sponsored ads and any business-related marketing from social media. So they have red, yellow, and green lists. It's all based on Palestine. So these are the people in the hit parade. Kylie Jenner, looking, I don't know, kind of Asian there. Gwyneth Paltrow, looking kind of, I don't know, stiff and frumpy. Beyonce, the red list. Oh. So these are people that have not spoken out against the horrors in Palestine. Beyonce, Taylor Swift, Miley Cyrus, Justin Bieber, Drake, Rihanna, Nicki Minaj, Kevin Hart, Dua Lipa, Jennifer Lopez, Lady Gaga, and Timothy Chalamet. Taylor Swift makes the red list for remaining silent. Look at that. Troye Sivan. So you Aussies, you got somebody on the yellow list. The celebrities on the yellow list include Billie Eilish, JoJo Siwa, Doja Cat, Charlie XCX, Troye Sivan, as well as prominent social media influencers. Mr. Beast, they're going after Mr. Beast. Addison Rae, Emma Chamberlain, Dylan Mulvaney. And wow, they're going after Dylan Mulvaney. So I guess these are mostly, well, they're not also social media influencers. Okay, so this is interesting, right? And it all is kind of floating around Algol, the demon star of beheadings and lynchings. A long list of Zionists you should block includes Olivia Wilde, Adam Sandler, Dwayne The Rock Johnson, Chris Pine, Aubrey Plaza, Floyd Mayweather, Lana Del Rey, Jerry Seinfeld, Chris Rock, Will Ferrell, and Katy Perry. Now, when are they going to describe that this is anti-Semitic. Like, is this falling into the anti-Semitic camp? Okay. So remember that day, May 6th. May 6th. Why is that an important day? I'm about to show you. May 6th is the birthday of Robespierre, the man who single-handedly was in charge of ordering more executions than probably anybody else on earth. He might have outstripped Joe Stalin. I don't know. Maybe not Mao. I think Mao might have. I think Mao might have. I think Mao might have outpaced him a little bit. But he ordered a lot of executions. And it's so fascinating that this whole thing started on the day of the Met Gala on May 6th, which is Robespierre's birthday. Like, how fucking synced up is that? Robespierre is a radical. He's a revolutionary. Aquarius rising. And he's got Chiron in Aquarius. And he's got that South Node in Capricorn. And what's interesting is that, again, if we look at astrology as the reanimation of time and space, transiting Pluto be right there, right? Right at the midpoint between his Chiron and his South Node. So it's almost as if we are exhuming the spirit of Robespierre. And we're doing it because the digital guillotine basically started on the dude's birthday, or the commemoration or the anniversary of his birthday. You can't make this shit up. This, by the way, is why I love astrology. When you see these connections. Now, Robespierre is a Taurus, and his sun is not too far off of Algol, right? His sun is about 9 degrees. It's not completely conjunct, but it's in the conjunction zone with Algol. And again, what do we know about Algol? And Robespierre winds up running the whole show. But when he finally gets to power, it just whiplashes on him. And he winds up being executed himself. Now, the French Revolution was 10 years in the making. So by the way, the French Revolution starts on May 5th in 84. That's when the French Revolution starts, May 5th. Robespierre, May 6th, right? And I believe May 5th is what? Bastille Day, right? If I'm not mistaken, is that Bastille Day? When they burned down the Bastille and they got all the munitions and they freed the 5 or 6 prisoners that were in there. That is the beginning, if I'm not mistaken, of the so-called French Revolution. So these days, May 5th and May 6th, are very important in that historical context. What's fascinating about Robespierre is that he decided that he was anti-Catholic. He was totally anti-Catholic. And what's ironic is that the Catholic clergy were very important. This is a really important thing to understand. So in France, they basically had 3 layers of society. They had the clergy, they had the royalty, and they had the working class, and they all were part of their so-called representation of government. So when the shit started to hit the fan, it was the clergy who broke from the elite and began to band and bond with the so-called working class or the tradespeople. And we can see that that has occurred in modern society. And I have this right here. Let me just read this to you. Just find it here. This is how it works. So they had 3 estates in France. The Estates General contained 3 separate bodies. The first estate representing 100,000 clergy, the second the nobility, and the third the commons. Since each met separately and any proposals had to be approved by at least 2, the first and second states could outvote the third, despite representing less than 5% of the population. Although the Catholic Church in France owned nearly 10% of all land, as well as receiving annual tithes paid by peasants, 3/4 of the 303 clergy. That's an interesting number, isn't it? 303, 33 elected were parish priests, many of whom earned less than unskilled laborers and had more in common with their poor parishioners than with the bishops of the first estate. So there's even kind of a class breakdown inside of the first estate. The second estate elected 322 deputies. Okay, that's an interesting number, isn't it? 322. That's the number of Skull and Bones, representing about 400,000 men and women who owned about 25% of the land and collected seigneurial dues and rents from their tenants. Most delegates were town-dwelling members of the noblesse de pays, or traditional aristocracy. Courtiers and representatives of the noblesse de robe, those derived from rank, who derived rank from judicial administrative posts, were underrepresented. Of the 610 deputies of the third estate, about 2/3 held legal qualifications and almost half were venal office holders. Less than 100 were in trade or industry, and none were peasants or artisans. To assist delegates, each region completed a list of grievances known as the cahier doléances: tax inequality and seigneurial dues, feudal payments owed to landowners, headed the grievance in the cahiers doléances, pardon my French, for the estate. So basically what happens during the French Revolution is the third estate gathers, and they do all these things separately, right? But the third estate gathers in public outside of where the second estate is meeting, and they will not leave until their grievances are heard. So instead of sending their representatives to meet with the representatives of the second estate and the first estate, they bring the whole estate, and they're not leaving until their list of demands is being met. And so as this is ongoing, they have these votes, and as these votes are taking place, more and more of the first estate is peeled off and joins the third estate. And that is the beginning of the French Revolution. And you can see in our time how this has occurred. Because when you look at what I would call, at least now, the third estate, which I don't believe is represented by the people, it is represented by the social Marxists and the people who are, quote unquote, fighting for social justice. Like, they're not fighting to end the Federal Reserve, right? They're not fighting for that. They're not fighting to lessen the burden of the government and get them off of our necks, or lessen government in general. They're not fighting for any of those things. They're fighting for things that many other people would think would be arbitrary or even imaginal. Climate change, gender equality, like all these so-called abstractions, right? This is theoretically what their race, all these things that have been codified as part of social Marxism, right? So what do we see? We see the church peeling off and joining this group, which they have. The Catholic Church is clearly peeled off. So you have the members of the First Estate who peeled off and joined the Third Estate. Liberation theology. Case in point, when Paulo Freire is summoned to the Council of Churches and he teaches them his version of what we would call a secular Easter, they're all in. And so the Council of Churches then sends out their messaging to all their churches so that their churches have the identification of the oppressed as part of their ecumenical practice. Because as you identify with the oppressed, you could easily transfer that into identifying with the suffering of Jesus easily, right? So it's almost this one for one kind of transference. So we see this with the church. Now the church has peeled off, and the First Estate is now part of the Third Estate, which is why the Third Estate has become so powerful. Because at a certain point, and by the way, the Third Estate that was involved in, for the time being, during this period of the French Revolution, are infiltrated by the Jacobins. And the Jacobins they're devils. The Jacobins are devils. So you have this infiltration of the Third Estate. So it's not just about, hey, we need to get a fair share and a fair break, blah, 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 right? Now you have this group that says, fuck it. We don't want anything that's fair. We want to be not just the Third Estate, we want to be the Second Estate. And guess what? We're going to be the Third Estate or the First Estate, because Robespierre, who becomes the leader of the revolution, hates Catholicism. He hates it. But he has to come up with his own religion, which I think is really interesting. Hold on. So Robespierre knows that now that he's tyrant, now that he's dictator, that they're going to need an organizing principle. And they don't have, and he's a member of the Jacobin Club, by the way. He's not a Catholic, and he hates the rationalists. He hates them. He hates the rationalists, and he hates reason. So he's not into Catholicism, and he's not really into rationality. So what does he create? He creates the cult of the supreme being. Now wrap your head around that. So he has his own version of a theocracy, but it's one that he's trying to put together. So Robespierre's quest for revolutionary change extended beyond politics to his opposition to the Catholic Church and its policies, particularly clerical celibacy. Despite denouncing excesses in the de-Christianization efforts of his political adversaries, he aimed to rejuvenate spirituality in France through deist beliefs. On May 6th, there's that date again, which is his birthday, 1794, Robespierre announced the Committee of Public Safety's recognition of the existence of God and the immortality of the human soul. This is fucking mind-blowing. So this guy is the head of the Reign of Terror, right? He's like right up there with one of the greatest executioners of all time, and now he's going to embrace God, right? Like we're going to have to embrace God now. We've swept out the past. We've gotten rid of the Catholic Church. We've gotten rid of the aristocracy. And now we need a new belief system. All right. So it is the Committee of Public Safety's recognition of the existence of God and the immortality of the human soul. Here, let me do this. Hold on. The following day, he delivered a detailed presentation to the convention on religious and moral principles intertwined with Republican ideals, introducing festivals dedicated to the supreme being and other virtues. So he is going to set up these festivals so they can get in touch with God, right? And this is what one of them looked like. Apparently, this looks like some John Levi shit right here. That's what it looks like. It looks like some. So this is the idea of where they would gather to worship the supreme being. All right, let's go back to this. Whoops, hold on. Get out of here. All right. So they went. They had this celebration. So that was called the Champ de Mars, the Hill of Mars. Robespierre made his public debut as a leader and convention president, expressing his passion for virtue, nature, and deist beliefs. Climaxing at the Champ de Mars, he delivered speeches emphasizing his concept of a supreme being devoid of religious figures, Jesus Christ or Muhammad. So he's created his own religion. Criticism ensued, with some accusing him of aspiring to godhood and creating a new religion, particularly after the allegations of involvement with Catherine Theot's prophecy conspiracy. The cult of the supreme being he championed aroused suspicion among anti-clericals and political factions, leading to doubts about his grasp on reality and ultimately contributing to his downfall, according to Madame de Stael. This period marked Robespierre's decline. Now, why is this important? Well, it's important because, let me go back to his chart. Right here. Because Robespierre has this thing set up. Right. He has this thing totally set up. Right here. Jupiter and Pluto in Sagittarius in his 10th house. Right? Jupiter and Sag, Pluto, he literally wants to create a new freaking religion. Right? Like somewhere in the back of his head, the French Revolution was a means to an end. And the end was the creation of this new religion. That's Jupiter and Pluto right there. Right there. And it does become his downfall. Now, what's interesting is this aspect that he has in common with Napoleon. And we're going to look at Napoleon's chart here really quickly. And it is, whoops, where are we? It is this Mars-Neptune conjunction. And for Robespierre, it's almost in a grand trine, right? And there's something about this Mars-Neptune conjunction, especially in Leo, where he is able to, I would say, charismatically command people, right? He seizes power. And I think it's this Mars-Neptune conjunction. Why? Because Napoleon has the same conjunction. It's just in a different sign. It's Mars Neptune in Virgo versus Mars Neptune. But they're both, Napoleon becomes Caesar. And Robespierre, that's who he wanted to become. And they both have, and now the difference between the two is that Napoleon has the grand trine to pull it off. Right? He's got Mars trine Pluto, Mars trine Uranus. And he's a Leo, right? He's a Leo. And Robespierre is a Taurus. So theoretically, he's a man of the people. Napoleon is not a man of the people. Napoleon is the aristocracy, right? In Napoleon's mind, somewhere in there, he's bloodline. So this is what powers Napoleon. And he's a Scorpio rising, so he's a transformer. And Napoleon, more often than not, gets what he wants. What is also interesting is that he's the guy that replaces Robespierre. And his true node, which is in Sagittarius at 22 degrees, is right on Robespierre's Pluto. See that? Where else did we see that? You know where else we saw that? Donald Trump and Jared Kushner. Donald Trump's Pluto is in Leo. Jared Kushner's true node is in Leo. And it's right on Donald Trump's Pluto. So what did Jared Kushner do? He was like a vampire. Here, let me have your Pluto. Let me have your Pluto. Your Pluto is so good. Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Dad. Right? I mean, that's what he did. He was like a vampire sucking on Trump's Pluto. And he made a shit ton of money while he was in the White House with Donald Trump. Shit ton of money. But in the case of Robespierre and Napoleon, Napoleon's true node is right there. He capitalizes on Robespierre's misfortune, and then the rest is history. Napoleon's story. Fascinating, isn't it? I think it's fascinating. I love this shit. All right. So let's talk about the roots of the French Revolution astrologically. Okay, so there are 3 planets that I want you to pay attention to here. All right. So this is considered to be the first day of the French Revolution, May 5th. Robespierre born May 6th. All right. Saturn in Pisces, check. Pluto in Aquarius, check. Jupiter in Cancer, check. All right. Where are we in October of 2025? Now, the degrees are slightly different, but what are we going to see? Jupiter in Cancer, Neptune in Pisces, and Pluto in Aquarius. So we have 3 of the outer planets, albeit at different degrees, that mirror the 3 of the planets during the French Revolution. And I think it's interesting. Again, they're not. Neptune's kind of close. Jupiter's kind of close. Pluto's not close. Pluto's like a 25. This is on Halloween, by the way. So I'm just doing a kind of a mirror effect because it feels like we're kind of in that process now, right? Like heads are going to roll. I mean, this is the digital version, the virtual version of the heads that are going to roll. And keep in mind that the French Revolution was a 10-year process. Let's go back to 2016, which is when I think all of this started, right? You have the death of Prince, and I've gotten into this before with the color purple on the Queen's birthday, the Purple Revolution, right? The Twin Cities, George Floyd. We've been down this path. So 2016, if you go 10 years out from 2016, you get to 2026. If you go 10 years out from 2020, which is where the revolution was televised, if we're playing with the same time scale, then that would end in 2030, which would coincide with Agenda 2030 in a 10-year cycle. And it seems like these revolutionary cycles last about a decade because the same thing happened during the Bolshevik Revolution. It's about 10 years for the Bolsheviks to completely take control and to kick out the provisionary government. So we're kind of in an interesting period because not only that, but we're also in a period where when Neptune goes into Aries, which it will next year, it's the same degree of Neptune and Aries that was around during the Civil War. So we have Civil War, Neptunian, Aries vibes. We have French Revolutionary vibes. We have American Revolutionary vibes because of Pluto also in Aquarius during the Civil War, right? And for now, we have Uranus and Taurus, which is where Uranus was during World War II. So we have all of these epochs that are all kind of coalescing together. These are major epochs. And even the Bolshevik Revolution, Uranus is in Aquarius during that time, and Pluto's in Leo. So it's where's Pluto? What's it? I think Uranus is in Aquarius during the Bolshevik Revolution. What's in Leo? I think it's Neptune. I think Neptune's in Leo. Anyway, just look at all these periods that are all coalescing now. And it feels like if we're gonna kind of wash this thing out, right? You may as well have these historical epochs all sort of rise up simultaneously, view the past through the present and the future, and then fucking, let the chips fall where they may. Right? Because it's all kind of stacking up. It's all kind of stacking up. And it won't be dull by any stretch. All right. Let's do a little Harrison Butker and get out of here. Thanks for being here. Appreciate it. Here he is right here. So if you haven't seen his speech, I highly recommend you watch it. I think it's incredibly inspiring, and he's got some cojones. He's got cojones. And guy's got an amazing chart. Now, I don't know his rising sign, so I've got him at where are we? I've got him at a noon chart. Okay. So the first thing is that he's a Cancer. And what do we know about Cancers? They are traditional. He's traditional. He's got traditional values. Sun in Cancer, Venus in Cancer, Mercury in Cancer. What's interesting about his Venus and Mercury is, Venus and Mercury is that they're conjunct. You can see here, let me make this a little bit bigger. They're conjunct, but they're almost singletons. We've got some minor aspects one of which with Venus is a biquintile. But they're naked, right? They're just kind of out there naked and raw. And, he's certainly speaking about women. And he said, hey, there are other choices in the world. There are other choices in the world. You don't have to go out and do what you're doing. You can stay at home and have incredible fulfillment by being a wife and a mother. And I owe all of my success to my wife, right? She's played a huge role in my, and so, he's basically saying, hey, look, you don't have to do that if you don't want to. He didn't say, woman, get out in that fucking kitchen and make me a sandwich. He wasn't saying that. He was basically saying, hey, look, there's other options for you, and you don't have to follow the script. And in fact, this other option may even be more fulfilling than you have considered. On the men's side, he's basically telling men, hey, stand up, get your sack back. They're giving you a raw deal, and have the courage and have the fortitude to stand up and be men. And I'm paraphrasing his speech, but this is essentially what he's saying. And he came down hard on COVID-19. He came down hard on the corporations. He came down hard on the politicians. Like, he was sympathetic to people who got their lives shafted. So it wasn't just, he wasn't being a poster child for, the Fourth Reich. No, he was being incredibly thoughtful. And he hit every single topical issue of the day flawlessly. He hit it with a laser beam. He's got a grand trine. He's got a Sun, Pluto trine to Jupiter. There's that Jupiter and Sagittarius, which we were talking about with Robespierre, right? It's retrograde. So I think the retrograde component to it, he's got the same conjunction as Robespierre, but different, right? Robespierre had Pluto in Sagittarius. He's not trying to create his own religion. He's just trying to get people to expand their awareness. And the retrograde part, I think, is interesting because he's espousing values that are not of this time, right? He's espousing values that are more classical and more traditional, which I think would be in alignment with the retrograde. And then he's got that Sun trine Saturn, and it's gravitas. He's got gravitas. The guy got up there and looked straight in the camera and didn't fumble the ball once. Not once. And he's got Saturn right here, trining Pluto, trining Jupiter, trining his sun. This guy, he's powerful. This is a very powerful astrological chart. And I know a lot of you in Chattaria know a little bit about astrology, and you would back me up on this. He was made for this. This guy was made for this. Kite pattern, mystic rectangle, grand trine, coming up in a Saturn return. He's doing what a Saturn return guy would do. He may walk away from football. I wouldn't be surprised. He's got a Saturn opposition with Mars, and Mars Chiron conjunction in Virgo. He's going to point out things that other people don't want to hear. He'll be critical. And Mars is an athlete, and he's going to take some fire for this, right? That's Chiron. He's going to take some heat. And he's got that Saturn opposition. He's got to do it, though. He has to. It's part of who he is. And he's got that true node in Scorpio, which is really interesting, right? I would almost put him as a Scorpio rising, by the way. I think I might put him as a Scorpio rising. And look at what he's done. More people are buying his jersey than any other player in the NFL right now. That's some Scorpio shit right there, by the way. Osmosis, magic. And the mystic rectangle, he'll land on his feet, even if he never kicks another football again. Hell of a kicker, by the way. Just saying. And what's interesting is the moon in Aquarius. You know, like he's able to stand out. And if you look at that moon, it's kind of outside the box. You know, it doesn't have any like harmonic relationships with any other planets. It squares Pluto. He's going to say things that are going to be uncomfortable, right? That's the nature of it. And he has a yod. And it's all about women. The moon is women. And he's got this yod with the sun, and he's got Chiron coming in there. And looks like 22, 29. You can throw Mars in on that yod too, especially since it's conjunct Chiron. So what's he going to get out of that? He's going to get the force of his being, which is his sun, and then Mars, which is his action, his will. Right. And boy, oh boy, did they come out and did he expose himself? Right. That's the yod being exposed. Hey, no problem. He doesn't have a problem with it. I guarantee you he doesn't have a problem with it. It's a very interesting chart. It's a powerful dude. Jupiter, Uranus sextile, right? Mars sextile Pluto. This guy's all about service. He's all about service. Saturn in Pisces, Mars conjunction with Chiron in Virgo. The Chiefs' offseason has been horrible. Horrible. So there are three things about the Chiefs' offseason that I think have marked their offseason. Number one, and I know there are people out there that like Taylor Swift. I don't like her. I don't think she's great for the culture. I don't think she's empowering for women. And I'm probably going to be chastised for this. But fucking what's his name? Travis Kelce. Marry her. Marry her. If you want to show other women and other people what it's like to be empowered, right? Go all the way. Go all the way. Put a ring on her. Now that would all of a sudden the Swifties go, oh, look, she's marrying a football player. She's getting married. How old is Taylor Swift? She must be creeping up on 35. And by the way, her tour, it's called Eras, whatever. It's affecting the football schedule for 2025 because she's performing in stadiums where they're going to have to change the games around because of her concert dates. Anyway, they got in bed with the lady in red. That's what happened because she got all garbed up in Kansas City red. She became the lady in red, the Scarlet Woman. And they got, I think, undue favoritism from the National Football League based on that. And the owner of the team, the initial guy, the guy that started it all off, was Lamar Hunt, who has Saturn in Aquarius at 0 degrees. And when Pluto conjuncted Saturn, I said to myself, that is it for the Kansas City Chiefs. They're done. They're done. And I'm like, there's a curse on the Chiefs now. And what has happened since they won the Super Bowl? They had a shooting at their Super Bowl parade. One person dead. Rashee Rice, who is one of their up-and-coming star players, was racing a rented Lamborghini in Dallas, and he got into a major accident. He was going like 115 miles per hour. 6 cars were involved in the accident. Right? He and his buddy were barely. They're lucky to be alive. But his reckless driving caused distress and probably some injury to 6 other drivers. Then after that, he gets involved in an altercation at a Dallas nightclub where they have to call the cops. One player. Kansas City starts a a ballot measure. They're on a ballot measure to get a new stadium. It fails. They can't get the funding for a new stadium. And they just won the Super Bowl. And then two other players who are kind of minor players just got busted for weed. Their season is not going so. This is the best thing that's happened to their season. But their fans would say that this is part of their problem. No, it's not. The other things are a part of their problem. But in some ways, it is part of their problem. But it's a good problem for them to have versus the other problems, which are shitty problems. Travis Butker is a serious person. He's a serious person with a powerful chart and one that has a purpose and a mission. And I could see it with that Mars Chiron conjunction. He's a warrior, but in Virgo, it's a different kind of warrior. I think of Mars and Virgo and maybe Mars and Pisces to a certain extent as like, these are the Mars of the Crusades. And Chiron there is him risking, right? Him risking his status by being expressive about his belief in his faiths. It's a very interesting chart, super interesting. And he may run the risk of being cut off monetarily with that Moon Pluto square. If he's unrepentant and he's not going to apologize, boy, I mean, and he's not. This guy's not going to get on his knees. It's like, well, my comments were taken out of context. No, he's not going to do that. That's not what this dude is about. And he may have to walk away from playing football. He may do it. Not because the heat is too much, but because he's just realized that he has a higher calling. And he'll go around the country and speak to groups and, reinvest his faith in young men and women. Whatever you think of his, Catholicism, whatever. The guy's got stones. And clearly he is imbued by his faith. That is somebody who is operating at the level of the true will. That's what I'm talking about. That's what I'm talking about. Operating at the level of the true will. And you could even see it with the Neptune-Mars trine. He's divinely inspired. Keep your eyes on Harrison Butker and say a prayer for him. We need more Harrison Butkers in the world. All right. 3 hours. I was late, but 281 of you are still here. And thank you for that. Appreciate it. Let's see. Who else we got? Lot of Taylor Swift talking chat. Okay, I'm out of here. Thank you all for being here, each and every one of you. I know that it was a long show, but hopefully you found something in here that was meaningful for you. Hit the like, subscribe. If you want to get a reading from me, you can do that. Come join Locals. And you'll be able to be a part of my summer forecast and other things that we got planned over there. And until then, God bless y'all. Have a good night. Sweet dreams. Bye for now.